So here's an interesting puzzle that I think illustrates the fact that, to some degree, we're not necessarily rational human beings. As I'm driving at this moment, I have hands free and all that kind of stuff. I actually have my little AirPod in my ear, so don't worry about that. And I don't have to, I'm doing a podcast, so I don't have to look at anything. Um, so as I'm driving here, it's like December of just getting close to Christmas time, and I see a lot of beautiful Christmas lights. They're really pretty. And the question that I was thinking about, to what extent do we focus on the financial costs of electricity and sort of the pollution costs of electricity? And it's an interesting problem when you think about Christmas lights because they don't serve any purpose other than for aesthetics, religious beliefs. Um, some people really, see the religious meaning behind them. Um, the definitely aesthetics, definitely for the Christmas season, definitely for things like, participating in a ceremony or ritual that we see every year. Also, sort of fellowship, like all these kind of things that are not necessarily. I mean, to some degree, you can classify this behavior as sort of a financial behavior because we do make cost benefit analysis, right? Like that's the reason why we don't have most of us don't do the lights that you see on National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. By the way, that's my wife's favorite Christmas movie. With all of the lights and all done up, as it's many of us, we think about our neighbors, like, oh gosh, our neighbors might be a little upset, but then B, we think of the financial considerations of that, right? So, but here's the thing: is that yes, things have gotten cheaper with lights. LEDs are consuming way less electricity. Uh, okay, sorry about that. Life gets in the way. All right, so you know the lights are definitely a lot more efficient than they used to be, and so we see a lot of that going on, right? We see a lot more lights than we would have, when I grew up in the '80s. There was definitely less lights. I mean, a string of lights would be ideal now. Um, a lot of people put up a lot more lights. We also see, there's another sort of factor that's coming into play is a lot of consumer goods have become extraordinarily cheap for two reasons, right? We're using more of the global economy, right? We can get things from China and various different countries, right? Which are much cheaper to manufacture. They manufacture in much larger scale than what they do here, right? They've got 1.4 billion people there, so we're just taking advantage of those economies of scale. Um, the other thing is that shipping costs are just astronomically cheap compared to what they used to be, and there's lots of sort of innovations that have happened in terms of how large these ships are. Amazon, various different information technologies, things like that, that make things a lot more cheaper than what they used to be and easier to sort of coordinate than what they used to be. It used to be a lot harder, right? um, Container ships or the containers have just plummeted the costs of shipping. So all these things make it easier to get blow ups and Christmas lights and all these things much more cheaper. But then on top of it, we're running these things, right? So blow ups have a motor, which is not efficient, right? Those big blow ups are not efficient in terms of the motor that's always running. And then we also see a lot more lights generally. So here's the thing that's interesting, right? If we made financial decisions completely, and to a degree we do, right? That's what I'm suggesting here is that we do, because it's not unlimited. We do see there's kind of an upper bound in terms of what most normal people put up in terms of lights in your neighborhood. Um, and if it was completely financially, our decisions were financially motivated, then we probably would never use Christmas lights at all. right? Because it's generally, there's no purpose to it. It doesn't really, they don't illuminate that much light. It's not utilitarian in the sense that we would think about in terms of financial cost benefit. Um, so, to what extent, and this is the interesting sort of problem, I guess, is, if you want to call it a problem or issue or whatever you want to call it, to what extent is our life um, dictated by utilitarianism versus, aesthetic and, just the beauty of something, right? Like, there's all sorts of costs that are associated with Christmas lights, right? Not just the cost of actually purchasing and running these things, but also you think about the pollution costs, right? These things are burning, consuming, generally fossil fuels. Okay, that's how we power most things. Um, to a large extent right now. So we're burning up these fossil fuels to have an aesthetic. But also we have, I mean, you could look at Christmas lights in a completely opposite way and think it's light pollution. And it is, right? They're polluting. It's harder to see, the stars and all those things because of these Christmas lights. Um, and even you could go to the extreme if you're like a bah humbug kind of person, right? You're a Scrooge McDuck. Um, it could go to the extreme. Like, people have these musical things and stuff that they play, which I love. I think it's great. But if you're a Scrooge McDuck, you're like, oh, that's noise pollution, and you can, and you get, noise complaints and all that stuff at city halls all over the country because of this, right? Um, and so, to what extent is, beauty and aesthetic and culture and, ritual, to what extent is that, to what extent are we willing to sort of pay above and beyond the utilitarianism that we actually sort of need to live? And that's an interesting question. And Christmas lights sort of illustrate this, how much culture, ritual, religion, all of these things that are very near and dear to me and very important to me, to what extent that they actually matter in this world, right? Like, they matter. That all of these things are very important. Um, Even you think about the cost it takes, the consumption that actually takes to employ a designer to make one of these blow ups. That's not free, right? And that consumes somebody that's very talented, a talented artist that's spending hours and hours and hours all year long, um, making these blow ups. And you can argue that they could be dedicated towards doing something that's more economically important to the country and, you know, all of that stuff, right? Like, working on these designers could be designing the next nuclear power plant or, all of those kind of things. But we have to realize a huge portion of being human and a huge portion of life, right? I'm not just talking about like humans, but I'm talking about life in general, right? Like, you think about dogs, you think about cats, you think about animals, all these kind of things. Culture is extremely important. Ritual is extremely important, and we consume a lot of time and effort, and resources, valuable resources. I dedicate every, at least a weekend putting up Christmas lights, putting up Christmas decorations, and taking those things down. It's like the damn pillows on the bed that my wife makes me put on all the time. Put on, you know, 12 different pillows on my bed because it looks beautiful, right? So, not complaining, but that's just, my life as a dude, as a husband. My wife's maybe gonna take this out of context at one point and get me into trouble. But you got to think about this, right? Like, there is a lot of things that we do in humans as human beings, as creatures, as living creatures, that are more dedicated to things that you can't necessarily explain as, yeah, maybe there's sort of social cues or something along those lines, but it's more hidden culture, aesthetic, ritual, things that are underlying. that are more important, I think, than all these other sort of things. And they hold us together, right? They make us who we are as human beings. They make us identify ourselves as we're good people, right? And that the symbolic nature of it, the ritualistic nature of it, makes us think about something that's a little bigger than who we are as human beings. Um, whether that is a religious force for some people, um, an entity, or it's just simply because that we just care about other people. And that matters, and we care about ourselves, and we know that we have to do things that are just genuinely nice. We need to think about those more, and we need to make those a priority more in our life. So don't you ever stop doing any of those ritualistic things because you're tired of it, that it costs money, all those kind of things. It's important to us as human beings and as people to give meaning in our life. So that, happy holidays. I think we can all use it this year. Stay safe and happy holidays.